It really is such an honor to be here with you today and to talk about our humble little review that a colleague and I did a couple of years ago. I think it was published in 2017 on massage therapy and arthritis. I thought to honor the actual paper that we wrote and to be respectful of research, which this conference is all about, I thought that I would talk about the process, the methods that we used to collect and appraise the evidence. You know, why did we come up with very low evidence for a certain outcome? What was the justification for that? So specifically, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about why this topic is so important to all of us. Let me see a show of hands. How many people have arthritis? Okay, yeah. Doctor diagnosed or just kind of feeling like you got arthritis? Okay. So basically, we're going to talk about prevalence for a few minutes and how prevalent osteo and rheumatoid arthritis actually is. And then the meat and the potatoes talk is going to be the process. You know, what were the methods that we used to collect, gather evidence, and then what were the methods that we used, the instruments that we used to evaluate the studies and then evaluate the actual evidence at the outcome level. And then we'll talk about what we found. And actually, I'm going to break all the rules in presentations and tell you what we found right now. I'm going to go out of order. So we found that depending on the outcome, it was very limited to moderate quality evidence that massage therapy actually helps as a standalone pain and functional outcomes. And we'll talk in more detail about what we really did find, but very limited to moderate quality evidence. And it wouldn't be a research conference if we didn't talk a little bit about limitations, right? There's always limitations no matter how amazing your study is and how, you know, all the thought that could go into it. There's always going to be limitations, and that's true of our study. And I'm going to pick it apart. And then, of course, there's so many possibilities out there for future research. So what are those future opportunities? So there's a lot that we don't know, and it's really exciting. We're kind of like on this tipping point of learning so much cool information about how to manage pain and how massage fits into the whole mix. Okay, so why was this topic important? So just to let you know a little bit about me, I wear two caps. So I'm a massage therapist and a personal trainer. So as a practitioner, I wear that cap. And then I also teach in the exercise science department at the University of North Florida. So let's talk about the practitioner piece first. So I kind of have this mercurial relationship with massage therapy. And over the years, it's kind of developed in that I found that clients that kind of rely on massage as a standalone, kind of treat me type of thing, fix me. The outcomes aren't as great as when people, your clients, are involved in the process where they say, hey, what kind of physical activity can I do? What kind of nutritional aspects should I be changing? So when people take a more active role and they're not quite as passive, it just seemed to me that the outcomes were much more positive. Now, this is strictly anecdotal, so the wheels were churning. I thought, wouldn't it be cool to do a little bit of research to see if I'm on point about this? It could be a total bias, because I do see things through a movement lens. Now, on the other cap, putting that one on, the epi perspective. So as part of our curriculum in exercise science, we talk about chronic disease and how exercise can impact outcomes related to osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis. And the evidence is quite strong that it's beneficial. So, but when we come up with these lectures and we talk about the various chronic diseases, we always get into the statistics and prevalence and incidence. So when I came across prevalence for arthritis, it was just staggering to me how many people actually suffer with, now keep in mind arthritis is a big spectrum of like 100 different types of processes. But in general, 2013 estimates, these are conservative estimates, mind you, place prevalence for arthritis at 54.4 million people. That's a huge number. And that's conservative estimates. And we know that because it's doctor diagnosed. We know that many people are out there without a physician's diagnosis of arthritis. So that's a conservative number. So what does this mean? Let's create context for that big number. It means likely 1 in 4 people in this room. So if we're looking around, 1 in 4, and that's about how many people raised their hands earlier, have arthritis. Meaning that's the number of people walking around with chronic pain, physical limitations. There's no known cure, right? It's a degenerative process, meaning it's going to worsen over time. Now, coming from a movement perspective, there are a couple important risk factors that I need to talk about that paint a gloomy forecast for arthritis. So when we look at obesity rates, we know that upwards of 40% of the US population, adult population, is obese. And we know that's a strong correlate. That's a strong risk factor for the development and worsening of arthritis. So let's consider that piece. And then let's layer in physical activity. How many people are actually meeting the physical activity guidelines set forth by the government? Now, physical activity guidelines, just to give you an idea, it's not going to the gym 7 days a week and running 5 miles every day. We're talking 150 minutes of maybe hopping in the pool and doing some kind of movement, walking, something like that, 150 minutes a week. 23% of the US adult population are meeting those guidelines. So basically we're not moving enough. So that's another layer that we have to consider. And then lastly, on a positive note, this is doom and gloom so far, but on a positive note, increasing age. So we're getting older, we're living longer, which is such a great thing, but increasing age is a strong risk factor for the incidence and the worsening of arthritis and arthritis symptoms. So we have these 3 pieces. And again, it paints kind of a gloomy forecast. So if we were prognosticators, if we were to forecast out to the year 2040, estimates now are at 80 million people that are suffering with a chronic degenerative disease with no cure. So taken together, that's why this is such an important topic that we need to know more about. Are you guys with me? Heck yeah, right? It's important. So it's really important for all of us to kind of understand more about arthritis and really understand more about what the research shows. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what we did, you know, the methods part of this whole systematic review. So basically we did, well, let me backtrack a little bit. So I'm not a researcher. You know, it would be insulting to call myself a researcher to the amazing researchers that are probably in this room. I'm more of a curious practitioner. So I want to know more about stuff that affects my clients. And I want to be able to teach it to my exercise science students as well. So I care about it. A lot of my clients have it, right? I want to do better by them. But I knew that I lacked the experience and the know-how, right? I didn't have the goods to actually do the research, to critically appraise the evidence that's out there. So that brought me to asking a colleague of mine, so James, be meticulous and show me the data, Chirilla. So that's just who he is, right? Be meticulous and show me the data. He doesn't believe something happens unless he sees the data. Does a bear poop in the woods. He doesn't believe it unless he sees it. So I said, what better person to ask to join me on this adventure? So Dr. Cirillo, he's a prolific metabolic syndrome researcher. He is not a massage, it's not in his wheelhouse. He loves massage, he'll get them, but he doesn't really know, what we know, right? But what he would bring to the team is rigor to the process. He would bring a critical eye, and he would bring this magnifying glass that would be able to appraise the evidence that's available to us. So I asked him, I was nervous. He's kind of scary. And he said, heck yeah, I'll join you, in different terms, but you get the idea. So he was on board. So anyway, we're off, and we're ready to collect and appraise evidence. So we're ready to dive in. So we did a systematic review, which is somewhat distinct from a narrative review. So a narrative review, they're amazing, they're awesome, but as part of that process, you're kind of able to cherry pick from the evidence and kind of pick studies that really support your point of view. And when you do a systematic review, there is a bit more rigor, and there are various steps that you have to hop through that keeps you honest, and keeps the process transparent. And being respectful of research in the whole process, we decided to do a systematic review. And we used the PRISMA guidelines, which includes about 2,000 items of a checklist. It's not really 2,000, it's only 25. So. But it seems like 2,000 when you're going through it, so it's a lot. But it's great because, again, it keeps you honest and it keeps the entire process transparent and pure. So basically, when you do a systematic review, there's 3 key fundamental processes involved. And the first is you have to define your inclusion criteria. What net are you going to cast? What kind of studies are you going to pull in? And when you set that inclusion criteria, you have to pull in every study that meets that, good or bad. So with that first step, in terms of the search criteria, I'll share with you in a moment the inclusion criteria that we used, but the search engines that we used, you have to actually define those and declare those up front. And I had done a couple of systematic reviews. Again, I'm still very amateurish at this whole process, but I had done a couple before, prior to this review, and I was just familiar with using these 3 search engines, Google Scholar, Medline, and Pedro. It's the only reason I chose them, and Dr. Cirillo was on board with that. So I was familiar with those, we chose those. Now, what are the next 2 key pieces and processes involved in a systematic review? The next piece is you have to evaluate the study quality. So at the study level, you have to go through and use some type of instrument which determines the quality of that specific study, and you do it for each study that you retrieve. So for that, we actually use the Pedro scale, and I'll talk more about that in the next couple of slides. But in terms of quality of evidence, that's the next big step that you take. So once you evaluate the study qualities, then at the outcome level, let's say pain, range of motion, walking distance, grip strength, those kind of things. At the outcome level, for each outcome, you then appraise the evidence. So there are the 3 big, broad, fundamental pieces to doing a systematic review.